Dear listeners, thank you for your incredible support in helping our channel grow. We're aiming for 1,000 subscribers, so please support us by subscribing and helping us reach this milestone. Now let's start the story. Flashback, Masha and Louise, furniture shopping. Yes, I should have known better. We arrived at the furniture store, walked inside, and the women in the store began to recognize me. I know because they pointed at me and began to whisper to their friends. I am thankful that this time they didn't come up to me or cheer and clap like the women at the fast food place. Unfortunately, Louise noticed and said, "Auntie Masha, they recognize you here too." I frowned and replied, "Yes, unfortunately they do." Michael added, "I guess the guys you took down were part of some sort of perv assault ring." Finally, a woman came up to me and said, "Ms. I wanted to thank you from the bottom of my heart for catching those terrible men. They have tortured me for over 20 years. She looked to be 40, which surprised me. So I asked, "The animal I caught would have been too young to have participated in your assault 20 years ago." She interrupted, "I guess you haven't seen the recent newspaper." She held it out to me. I took it, and there on the front page was all the information. Louise looked over my shoulder as we read. I was shocked when it said that the men had passed the victims down from father to son. The bartender and the I caught told the police everything, including the location of all the videos they had taken, and had given the names of the entire assault squad, what the police called it. Some of the were now old men. Louise remarked, "I'm glad they caught them all and got the videos." The woman that approached me confirmed, "Yes, that is good news if they haven't been uploaded to the internet already." I queried, "Why did they do that?" The woman provided an evil answer. They traded the videos of the assaults with other online perverts. Since this woman approached me, several other women approached and shared similar stories. I was angrier at the men than I was at the teenagers who attacked the bus. I looked at Louise and said, "Louise, I think I need to offer Krav Maga lessons to the women of this city." Michael asked, "What's Krav Maga?" Louise said, "It's a form of Israeli martial arts that Masha used on the two men who tried to assault her." Michael commented, "It must be really effective because the paper said Masha broke their arms and noses." I replied, "If I knew now what those two men were doing and how many women they assaulted, I would have killed them." Louise attempted to calm me down. "Masha, you did the right thing. They now have the whole assault ring and all their computers. If you had killed them, the police wouldn't have learned anything beyond just the two of them. So the arrest of the whole gang is because you didn't kill anyone." I was still angry and swore the police in this town are fools if they didn't catch these sooner. The women who were around me agreed, and Louise stated, "We should have a protest march." The other women agreed, and the next thing I knew, we all walked out the door and started down the street. The women began to shout slogans, "The police are idiots. Kill all assaulters. Why did we have to suffer for so long?" I looked over at Louise and asked, "What about your furniture?" Louise smiled and said, "This is more important than furniture." Then she continued, "Let's go to City Hall." We made several turns, marched down the main street of this town, and gained more women all the time. Things were good until flashback, Jack and Ben at the hospital. I sure as hell didn't like this mission Ben was going on. It sounded like a suicide mission to me. I searched around and finally found Todd. He was in a piece of shit room, so I complained, "What the hell did you choose this room for?" He replied, "Sorry, Sergeant, I was told by a corporal to take this room." I figured something like this might happen, so I asked, "Where is this CPL?" Todd took me to a nice as hell room and said, "That's him, SGT." The corporal was taking it easy on a bed, so I ordered Tin Hut. He practically tripped over his own feet jumping up. I walked over to him, got in his face and asked, "Corporal, did you tell this private, who is my aide, to take that piece of shit room he was in?" He apologized, "Sorry, Sergeant, I didn't know he was your aide." I continued to berate him. "Well, now you do, Corporal, and now we're taking this room as ours, so go find somewhere else to stay." He grabbed his gear and left while Todd remarked, "Wow, that was impressive." I shrugged and said, "Todd, the next time someone other than Lieutenant George gives you any shit, tell them you're my aide." I found an empty room with a mattress and hit the sack as well as I could. I was damn near asleep when a corporal came into the room, and the noise woke me, so I swore, "Get the hell out of here. I'm trying to sleep." He said, "Yes, Sergeant, sorry, SGT." I finally drifted off to a troubled sleep. I kept seeing the faces of the Christian children being assaulted by the scumsuckers. I woke up, found it was just getting dark outside, and I was now angry as hell. I began to get my pack ready for the LRP, long-range patrol, mission I was going to do. I knew that I would have to carry everything I needed for what I figured would be possibly several weeks. We'd found a cache of weapons in the hospital when we finally took it from the scumsuckers, so I had already searched through it and found the best AK-47 that we had. Because weight would be at a premium, I decided on taking an AK instead of my M4 so I could acquire more ammunition in the field. Hell, it was accurate enough for killing scumsuckers. I loaded my tactical vest with as many mags as I could fit into it, added back the extra 2 ceramic plates I usually used, and tried it on. It was heavy as hell, but I would get used to it. I then began to add the frag grenades on it, and of course it just got heavier. I moved and jumped some and taped the things that rattled. Unlike my first recon mission, I wasn't going to wear my ghillie suit. With it on, there was no way I could cover enough ground in the time I had. I was hoping that darkness, the lack of NV gear by the scumsuckers, and me being sneaky as hell would be enough. Plus, I planned on holing up during the days. Next, I started to work on my pack. I loaded a crap load of extra NV batteries. I decided that I could only eat 2 meals a day, and most of those would have to be cold, so I packed 14 MREs but ignored the heaters and all the extras I usually used. I finally loaded a basic first aid kit. I wished I could have carried more first aid gear because I was sure the children were going to be injured, but my pack was already way overweight. I hefted it up. Yeah, it was heavy as hell. But again, I would get used to it. I headed out of the room to find Jack. Ben came into our room and I remarked, "Hell, you look like a ghost." He pulled down his skull mask and said, "I'm hoping that the scumsuckers I don't shoot first will be scared to death." I tried again. "Ben, are you sure you wanna?" He interrupted. "Hell yes, Jack. I've never been more sure of a mission in my life. I do need to give you some information, though." I shook my head and said, "Well, tell me what I need to know." Ben said, "Jack, I've thought about it, and I really can't be bringing the children back with me each time I do a rescue. So I'm going to send them back to the hospital as I free them." I interrupted. "Ben, how will we know they aren't suicide bombers?" Ben grinned and said, "Since we captured the British Taliban bomb maker, we haven't had a single child suicide bomber attack the hospital. This doesn't mean they aren't going to find a new bomb maker, so I will instruct the children to approach the hospital with their robes open. Get that corporal with your spotting scope to check them out. If they don't have their robes open, or if they have a vest on them, then they are probably new suicide bombers." I asked, "Anything else?" Ben handed me his sniper rifle in a hard case and said, "Yeah, this had better not disappear while I'm gone, or I will kick everyone's, but when I get back. And don't let anyone else even open the case." He began down the stairs, and I was surprised to see the whole rest of the hospital team waiting for him on the bottom floor. They had all heard of the mission and were there to see him off. I had already put the kibosh on the betting pool on whether he was coming back or not. He flipped down his NV goggles, opened the door, and was gone. "With all the Marines here," I instructed, "Ben's going to be sending the children that he frees back here, and we need to make sure they aren't wearing suicide vests. Where's the corporal that has my spotting scope?" He stepped forward, and I said, "You need to work up a team to scan the children as they approach the hospital. If they are wearing a vest, or if they aren't holding their robes open, then they are to be shot." I added, "I sure as hell don't want to shoot any innocent children, so let's get this right." A chorus of, "Yes, Sergeant," filled the room. I noticed the Marine standing watch had NV gear and smiled. That had to be Ben's doing. Hell, I was going to miss him, and I hoped he made it back. Flashback, Jennifer, at home. Daddy remarked, "Jennifer, that was a good thing you did by calling Jed for Daniela." I smiled at Daddy and replied, "Thanks, Daddy." Daniela's one real regret in her life is not marrying a young man she knew in Peru. Daddy asked, "How did you find that out?" I continued, "Daniela told me about it when she told me I shouldn't let mother force me into dancing." Daddy added his input, "Daniela is right, Jennifer. If you don't want to dance anymore, you shouldn't have to dance." I queried, "If I don't dance, who will deal with mother's reaction?" Daddy said, "We will deal with her problem as a family. Jennifer, you're old enough now to start making your own decisions in life." I teased, "Does this mean I can wear my gothic clothing again?" Daddy frowned and laughed. "Jennifer, I personally think it ruins your beauty, but if you feel you need to express yourself that way." I stamped my foot and complained, "Daddy, I was teasing you." Daddy laughed and said, "And I was teasing you, so now we're even." Daniela walked into the room and announced, "Jed is coming over for dinner tonight." I asked, "What are you going to make for dinner?" Daniela asked, "Senorita Jennifer, would you please help me make pizza?" I smiled and agreed, "Certainly. What toppings are we going to put on it?" Daniela replied, "Senorita Jennifer, I am not sure." I replied, "Don't worry, we will figure it out." Flashback, Alexei at home. Father prepared for his interview, and I did not like the suit he decided to wear, so I asked, "Father, don't you have a newer suit?" Father said, "No, Alexei, this is my only suit." "Why do you ask?" I remarked, "I am concerned because it is sort of old-looking and you should look your best for your interview." Father replied, "Alexei, it will have to do because it is the only one I have." I did change the tie he had on for a different one which was more modern and asked, "Father, might I come with you in the car?" He smiled and replied, "Certainly, Alexei. I wouldn't want to leave you home alone." We went to the car, he drove to the new laboratory, opened the door, smiled at me, and said, "Alexei, wish me luck." I complied. He walked inside the laboratory, and I began waiting. Flashback, Ira and Mira, continuing. We traversed to the opening of the cave and oculated men at the campsite inspecting the group of self-terminated men. I looked at Mira and whispered, they have not yet oculated our trail. We need to further observe them, and if they oculate our trail, we will terminate them. Mira asked in a whisper, my sister, perhaps an attack at this time would be a better option. I considered my sister's response until my sister decided to assault them without me. She charged out of the cave, firing her AK at the men, so I quickly followed her. These men were not surprised and probably better trained and quickly returned fire. We translocated behind some boulders as bullets danced off the rock above us. I swore, son of a female Saluki. Mira, that attack was poorly conceived and now you have created problems for us. Mira taunted, Ira, my sister, do not be the southern end of a northbound jackass. I was bored in the cave and now I am not bored. I decided that if we survived this mistake, Mira was going to get the trouncing she deserved. Flashback, Todd, on the mission. Roberto's cousins finally arrived with the truck. They were a little late, but I had already learned that people were more relaxed about promptness here than I was used to. They called Roberto, and he directed them to the first store where I bought the stove. When we arrived at the store, they were already loading the stove into the truck, so I paid the proprietor. He mentioned, I had your items brought over from my cookware store. I examined the cookware. It was all here, so I also paid him for the cookware. We rode on the back of the truck as we headed to the electronic cookware store. The proprietor was happy to see us. I paid him, and the cousins loaded the electronic items in the truck. We finally arrived at the store where I bought the dishes, where she was once again apologetic to us. I verified that all the dishes were present, noticed that one bowl was cracked, pointed it out to Roberto, and he scolded her. You should know better than this. She once again apologized, brought out a new bowl, and replaced the cracked one. The cousins very carefully loaded the dishes, then secured everything, and we headed back to the house. We arrived, and I was happy that Maria and Gail were not home. The cousins unloaded the truck, and when they got to the stove, Roberto asked, Todd, would you like them to connect the stove for you? I nodded, and one of them began installing the stove. I watched closely to make sure that he checked the gas fittings so they didn't leak. When he was done, we tried all the burners along with the oven, and they worked fine. The cousins left in the truck, but this time I made sure to pay them. Roberto scolded me after they left. Todd, you paid them too much money. I smiled and wrote on the tablet, they deserved it for the excellent work they did. Plus, I know if I ever need their help again, they won't hesitate to help me. Roberto suggested, let's go by the gymnasium, pick up Maria and Gail, and go to the restaurant for lunch. Even though I wanted to try out the new kitchen, I knew that everything needed to be washed first, so I nodded my head in agreement. Roberto drove the car to the gym. We got out, went inside, and found Maria and Gail. Roberto said, we're going to the restaurant for lunch. Maria complained, I'm all sweaty and I stink. Gail signed, I don't care, I'm hungry. Maria translated for Roberto, who laughed and said, I guess it's decided, we're going to the restaurant. Roberto gave the women some towels to sit on so they didn't get the car dirty, and we headed to the restaurant. Present, Liz, Bernie, Jens, Ben, and Ira, at the hospital. Jens walks into the room right as I go into another contraction, so I begin my Lamaze breathing. Bernie smiles and greets them. Good that you guys could make it in time. Jens smiles and replies, I'm glad that we were in time. The contraction finishes and I comment, that was a pretty damn strong. Jens replies, it seemed like it from the look on your face. I smile and answer, I'm not sure a woman my age should be having children. Jens laughs and replies, come on Liz, you know better than that. You're not that old. Bernie, who's the official clock watcher, announces, I'm taking my job seriously, so I announce, and it was faster than the last one. This one was at 4 minutes 30 seconds. Jennifer smiles at Liz, comes over, takes her hand and asks, Liz, are you doing okay? Liz is being a trooper and replies, yeah Jens, I know I can take something for pain if I need to, but I don't want to do it unless it's necessary. Ira walks over and whispers something to Jennifer. Jennifer shakes her head and says, Ira asked me if I could take away Liz's pain like I did for Mira, but labor is different than the abortion, so I reply, no Ira, not this time. I smile at Liz and tell her, Liz, you look beautiful. Liz laughs and counters, yeah right. I know I look like Bernie's been beating on me. Bernie complains, Liz, my wife, I would never do that. Almost as if on cue, the preacher walks in, sees Ben and me, and says, good, you two are finally here since I need your signatures as witnesses to the marriage. He hands us the marriage license, then I almost make a mistake and sign Jennifer Donaldson, but catch myself in time. Ben of course has no problem. I look at Liz and ask, so are you now Miss Townsend? Liz smiles and says, for now I will keep Liz Morgan for when I do reports, but yes, I'm really Ms. Townsend. Ben remarks, I remember something, so I ask, Bernie, are you any relation to Peter Townsend? Bernie looks up from his timing task and asks, who? I laugh and reply, that's right. Peter Townsend, the guitar player for the music group The Who. Bernie replies, no, Ben. That group was English and I'm not English. But I do wish I had some of his talent and money. I reply, well, the station is doing great, so money shouldn't be an issue. Liz begins another contraction and Bernie instructs, Liz, don't forget your breathing. Liz begins breathing funny, so I move beside Jens and ask, what's Liz doing? Jens smiles at me and explains, Liz and Bernie took an online Lamaze course. In the class, they teach breathing methods to cope with the pain. I continue to watch and remark to Jens, it sort of reminds me of Kapil body pranayama. Jens remarks, Kapil is forehead, body is shining, and pranayama is breathing. I interrupt. That's right, skull shining breathing. Jens counters, Ben, that involves using the abdominal muscles to pull in the stomach, and Liz isn't doing that. She's just focusing on the breathing instead of the pain. However, the rhythm of it is the same. Tom walks into the room and announces, what? No baby yet. I was hoping to win my bet. I remark, Tom, we never agreed on what the winner was going to win. Jens agrees, that's right. With both of us not drinking anymore, it can't be Knob Creek. Liz's contraction is over and she complains, what are you guys betting on? I look at her and explain, the sex of your baby. I say it's going to be a boy, and Jens and Tom both bet it's a girl. Tom remarks, yeah, from the way you were carrying the baby, I still think it's going to be a girl. I laugh again and comment, yeah, we know you're some sort of baby expert. Bernie says, we don't care if it's a boy or a girl. Liz adds, as long as it's healthy. Jens suggests, I think the bet should be for a nice dinner. Tom adds his 2 cents. I like that idea. I shoot them both down by saying, where do you plan on finding better food than what Mabel cooks? Tom laughs and agrees, yeah, you're right. I still don't have any idea how you've lost weight, Ben. I look at Jens. She blushes and Liz goes into another contraction and says, Bernie, I want to push. Bernie looks at the nurse and the nurse says, I need to find the doctor. She leaves. I look at Jens and then say, Tom, I think that's our cue to leave. Tom agrees, you're right. Jens teases, you bunch of cowards. I smile at her and say, no, I just don't think Liz would appreciate us seeing everything. Bernie agrees, I know I don't want that. Ira states, Mr. Blaine, I cannot be with you and Ms. Blaine simultaneously. Tom solves the problem when he suggests, Ira, we will go back to the Cobra where Mira is standing guard. We head out of the room and back to the garage. Tom's phone rings. He answers it and says, Ben, it's Gretchen for you. I take the phone and Gretchen says, Ben, I think we've finally found a phone that will work for you and everyone else. What were the names of the applications you need to run on the phone's computer? I reply, thank God. I was getting tired of not having a phone. The 2 applications I need should be in the Google Play Store and are called Shooter and Strelick. Gretchen replies, okay, I have one of the phones here and will make sure the applications can be installed on it. But I have no idea how to run the applications. I reply, don't worry, when we get back to the tunnels I will make sure they work correctly. I hang up, hand the phone back to Tom, and he comments, I wondered why you guys didn't have phones. I reply, Samantha's phone was hacked, and because of that Gretchen wouldn't let us use an Android phone. Tom asks, do you know who hacked her phone? I shook my head and reply, we don't have any firm idea. We did keep the phone, but it's in the Faraday cage in the control room. Tom asks, if I could get that phone, we could probably find out who hacked the phone and charge them. But I bet it's Stacy Summers who did it. I shake my head and complain, what in the hell did I ever do to that bitch to make her so crazy? Tom laughs and suggests, it's what you didn't do to her. I bet you never slept with her. I grumble, that's right. I never did, and I certainly never will. Tom says, women like that are used to getting whatever they want. She wants you, and you don't want her, so that's the problem. I ask, please tell me this time that you're locking her away for good. Tom grins and says, hell, we've decided to charge her as a terror so that many of the legal loopholes won't apply this time. He checks his watch and says, by now they should already be interviewing her. We arrive at the Cobra and Mira informs us, Mr. Blaine, I need to attend the sanitary facilities. Tom says, don't worry, Mira, I will watch Ben for you. I swear, sometimes those 2 really get on my nerves. Tom just laughs at my comment. Present, Samantha, visiting Bill. The surgeon comes out through the door and says, I understand you're here to see Bill Brown. I smile at him and ask, how did the surgery go? The surgeon shakes his head and says, it went really good. I've never seen such a clean break of the ulna and radius in my life. It was like someone snapped them like a stick. He was in so much pain, we only took him to surgery to use anesthesia so we could set the bones. Mr. Brown said a woman did this to him. I reply, yes, it was a woman who quickly retaliated after he grabbed her arm. The surgeon shook his head and says, that's certainly not a woman I would want to meet in a dark alley. Mr. Brown is in recovery, but he should wake up soon and be ready to leave later today. We continue to wait. Present, Stacy, alone. The agents finally get tired of questioning me since I refuse to talk to them. They take me back to my cell, take off the shackles and leave. I sit back on my bed, lie down, and begin to sleep. That doesn't last long again as the agents come into my cell, demand that I stand facing the wall, put the shackles on me again, and lead me into the hallway. I ask, where am I going now? They reply, you're going to see a judge. If they think that I will say more to a judge than I did to them, they are totally crazy. They take me into the same interrogation room, but this time it contains a camera and a television. Once again, they fasten my shackles to the table and turn on the television and camera. I see a judge and he asks, Miss Summers, you are being charged as a terror for your contact of the terror cells by mobile phone and the information you relayed to them. How do you plead? Again, I don't say a word. The agent says, Judge, she refused to answer any of our questions earlier. The judge says, no problem. Because she's being tried as a terror, we don't have to have her answer any questions. I interrupt. I will only answer questions with my lawyers present. The judge stops and says, Miss Summers, apparently you don't understand. Because you're being held under the Patriot Act, many of your normal rights have been suspended. One of those suspended rights is the presence of lawyers before questioning. You also need to understand that we can hold you indefinitely. I smile at the judge because I know better. I have many friends in high places, and I know my lawyers will be contacting them. Present, Samantha, visiting Bill. Bill finally comes out of the back room, sees us, walks up to us, and says, I can't believe that Destiny did this to me. I remark, I guess you should be more careful about who you touch. Bill agrees, that's for sure. I've never felt pain like that in my life. I tell Bill, I stopped by and saw Stacy. She's in a terrible mood. Not only that, the agents told me they have invoked the Patriot Act, so she's being charged as a terror. Bill swore, son of a bitch. I need to get on the phone and call in all of Stacy's friends and benefactors before they do something really stupid, like move her to Guantanamo. I am almost shocked as I reply, surely they wouldn't do that. Bill says, hell, they've done it before, and I sure don't want it happening to Ms. Summers because once someone is transferred there, they don't usually return. Ms. Stevens, do you have a phone I could use? I reply, not anymore since my phone was hacked, probably by Stacy. Let's head to the van. As we walk toward the van, John offers, Bill, you can use my phone on the trip back to Leadville. John hands his phone to Bill. Bill pulls out a notebook, holds it in his hand as well as he is able, and begins to make some calls. As I'm driving back to Leadville, I can kibitz on the conversations, and I'm impressed because he's talking to some very powerful senators and congressmen. Bill finishes by calling Stacy's lawyers and lets them know the good news, that they will now be able to see Stacy. He hands the phone to John, and I remark, the list of people you called was impressive. I didn't know that Stacy knew them. Bill says, yeah, she made some good friends by helping to finance their re-election campaigns. So it was time to call in some favors. They are calling the judge and putting pressure on him to revoke application of the Patriot Act. But it's still not going to get Ms. Summer released since she really screwed up this time. I ask, Bill, what is it with her and Ben Blaine? Doesn't she realize that Ben is never going to leave Jennifer? Bill replies, Ms. Summers is used to always getting everything she wants. It comes with being rich and privileged. She told me how incredible she felt when she spent time with Ben Blaine and how she never wanted it to end. Ben Blaine left her in the middle of the night, and she's obsessed on him ever since. And now she is on the kick that Jennifer Blaine is a witch. I seriously ask, but then it makes no sense Stacy calling the terrors on Ben. Bill says, Ms. Stevens, she didn't call the terrors on Ben Blaine. She called them to take out Jennifer. It finally makes sense to me, and I continue. Bill, do you still have the paperwork that Stacy had about Jennifer being a witch? Bill replies, yeah, it's back at the office. Don't tell me you think it might be true. I reply, well, Destiny is some sort of spirit animal, so who the hell knows? Then I give him some bad news. The paperwork might not be there anymore. The FBI cleaned out a lot of the office. Bill swore, those sons of a bitches. John, can I borrow your phone again? John once again hands his phone to Bill. Bill calls the lawyers and gives them hell about the FBI taking things out of the office. He finishes and remarks, well, they should return everything except Ms. Summers' computer. Apparently, they need it for evidence. Then Bill continues, I just figured that Ms. Summers was using the whole Jennifer being a witch as a possible insanity plea, but bringing up Destiny now makes me wonder if Ms. Summers could be right. I finally remark, I really want to see the paperwork that Stacy came up with. Bill confesses, perhaps I should take Ms. Summers seriously and read it myself. Flashback, Masha and Louise, protest march. It was quite exciting being with the other women as we marched towards City Hall and chanted slogans. Things were going well until we reached City Hall and the police came out. The sergeant whom I recognized from the other night had a bullhorn and announced, your march is illegal because you do not have a permit. Disband or we will arrest you. The women began to shout, hell no, we won't go. I joined them. Louise grabbed my arm and said, Masha, we need to leave because if we get arrested they will take Linda from me. I looked at Louise and noted she was frantic, so I said, "Okay, Louise, we will leave for Linda's sake." We turned, began to leave and realized that the police had taken up a position behind us. The other women marchers charged the police in front while Louise and I tried to escape through the rear of the crowd. The police stopped us and one of them said, "You're not going anywhere except to jail." Louise began to cry. The police officer roughly grabbed Louise, which was uncalled for, and I took over. I quickly put him on his rear and stated, "We are just trying to leave. We did not know marching was illegal without a permit." Unfortunately, this incited the other police officers to charge me. They were armed with batons, and I had nothing. The other women realized what was happening, turned and attacked the officers who began to beat them with the batons. I became enraged and began to kick their rears using my Krav Maga skills. Finally, the nice police officer came up and ordered, "Masha, stop fighting us now." I informed him, "I will not cease until the other officers stop beating the women with their batons." He prevailed upon the other officers to stop, so I prevailed upon the women to stop. Now things were at a standstill. The sergeant came up and ordered, "Arrest all of them, especially that one." He pointed at me. I complained, "I was just protecting the women your officers were beating." The sergeant ordered, "Save your breath for the judge." They took all of us into the police station, which was adjacent to City Hall, and began to process us. Louise whispered to me, "Masha, I hope that Linda is okay." I noticed something and put her mind at ease. Michael is here and is holding Linda, so I'm sure that he will take care of her. Michael and Linda waved. Then they left the station. Louise sighed and said, "I never figured this would happen. Who knew there was a law against marches?" I frowned and confessed, "Louise, this is partially my fault because I was swept away in the excitement of the moment." Louise replied, "I did see the television stations broadcasting this. Perhaps they will help." I began to help some of the women who were injured by the officers' batons, and the sergeant scolded, "Ma'am, what are you doing?" I glared at him and replied, "I'm rendering aid to these women that your officers beat with their batons." The sergeant developed a questioning look on his face and questioned, "Don't I know you from somewhere?" Louise replied for me, "You should know her. She's the one who helped you catch the assaulters." He said, "No wonder I recognize you. What the hell were you doing today?" I replied, "We were exercising our right to complain about how this police department didn't catch the assaulters for more than 20 years. That's a travesty of justice." One of the ladies stood and announced, "Don't worry, ladies. I'm a lawyer, and we're going to sue the hell out of this police department and city. By the time we're through with them, they will never make this mistake again." The women began to cheer, and the sergeant complained, "Are you trying to start another riot?" I walked up to him and counter-complained, "We never started a riot. We participated in a peaceful march until your officers overreacted and began to beat the women with their batons." The lawyer stated, "It's an obvious case of police brutality, and I can't wait to grant interviews with the television stations. Not only did the police fail to catch the assaulters, they beat the women who had been assaulted by the assaulters. I bet this makes national news." A man walked up and identified himself. "I'm the mayor, and I'm here to personally apologize for what just happened." The women began to complain, "Aren't you late? He's always late. We don't accept your apology." The lawyer replied, "They are right. It's too late for an apology. Your police force beat defenseless women with their batons." He pointed at me and stated, "Don't blame me. She's the one who started it when she attacked the officers." The lawyer defended me, "Get your head out of the sand. This is the woman who's been doing the job your police department should have been doing. Just in case you don't recognize her, she's the one who stopped the teenage gang of bus attackers, and she just helped your police force capture the assault gang. Instead of blaming her, you should be giving her an award." The mayor recanted, "I'm sorry, I didn't know that. Please forgive me, MS." The other women began to complain again, "Of course you didn't. You couldn't see your nose in a mirror. Yes, she does deserve an award." I smiled and stated, "I would just like reinstatement of the 24-hour police protection in front of my house that I was promised by the base commander." The mayor looked a little sick and said, "Don't tell me. Your name is Maria Reynolds." I affirmed, "That is correct." He looked at the sergeant and asked, "Why hasn't this police department continued to provide the round-the-clock protection as we agreed with the base commander?" The sergeant replied, "Well, we needed the manpower for other operations." The mayor said, "That's unacceptable." Then he looked at me and said, "I hope that you don't tell the base commander about this." I interrupted, "I plan on informing him today and ask him if he can provide military police to protect my house and family." He turned to the sergeant and ordered, "Sergeant, release all these women immediately." The lawyer stated, "Don't think this is going to save your butt. The first thing I'm doing is talking to the television stations and then filing lawsuits." Louise and I walked out of the police station and were accosted by the television stations. I said, "I have nothing to say, other than I plan on teaching free Krav Maga classes to the women of this city." Louise said, I have a few things I would like to say. She gave a huge interview to the television station and mentioned her animation many times. It was all I could do to keep from blushing. When Louise was finished, I noticed Michael in the parking lot, holding Linda. I grabbed Louise's arm and moved toward him. He said, I didn't think you two would be released so soon. Linda cooed and reached for Louise. Louise took Linda and announced, we had a lawyer in our group, and she put the fear of God into the mayor and the police. Michael suggested, well, perhaps we can finish shopping for your furniture. We returned to the furniture store and purchased Louise's new furniture. Flashback, Ben, on the mission. I was thankful as hell the scumsuckers didn't have NV gear since it made this mission, which was still dangerous, move from impossible to practical. I slipped into the night after a great send-off by the other Marines and began to scan the area around me. I noticed a few flickers of light in a few of the buildings. I determined they were candles, so I worked my way toward them. One of the problems was keeping the noise down while I walked since the ground was littered with pieces of destroyed buildings. Much of the debris was from our artillery, but some was from the earthquakes, and it all made nasty crunching noises under my boots. I finally figured out a solution, so I sat down, pulled my only pair of spare socks out of my pack, and slid them on over my boots. I stood up and began to walk, and while I wasn't totally quiet, it was much better. I approached the first house, if you could even call it that, because it was more like a collection of walls with a shitty roof on top of it that I was sure wouldn't keep out any rain, not that we got much rain here. There were holes in the wall that functioned as windows but had no glass in them, just some shitty blankets or rugs covering the window holes. I stopped outside, listened, and sure as hell didn't like what I heard. I heard a man grunting and a girl crying. I slowly and carefully moved the blanket covering the window hole and was pissed as hell when I saw a full-grown man on top of a young teenage girl. My first instinct was to shoot the scumsucker and end his miserable life, but I knew that would alert every other scumsucker in the area. So I slowly slipped into the hovel of a room, pulled my K-bar, slipped up behind him, and slit the mother scumsucker's throat. The young girl quickly covered herself and looked scared until I showed her the American flag on my uniform. Then came the problem: how to tell her to head to the hospital with her robes open. We moved to the window. I pointed to the hospital, opened my jacket, and made sure she understood. She smiled at me, hugged my hand, and I watched her head out of the hovel toward the hospital, holding her robe open. I hoped like hell Jack or the other Marines didn't shoot her. I searched the rest of the room, found an AK, took one of my frag grenades, pulled the pin, and set the AK on top of it, holding the handle down. Then I slipped out the other side of the hovel and headed toward the next flicker of light. Flashback, Jack, at the hospital. I was almost asleep when one of the Marines knocked on the door and said, Sergeant, you need to see this. I jumped out of bed, kicked Todd's bed, and said, come on. He woke up and followed me out of the room. I asked, what the hell did you see? The corporal answered, Sergeant, there is a young girl walking toward the hospital. She has her robes open. I put on my NV gear, looked, and swore, well, I'll be damned. It looks like Ben's mission is working. I announced in my command voice to the rest of the night watch, make sure you don't shoot her. Then I added, someone wake up the doctor and nurses and tell them they have a patient coming in. Lieutenant George finally showed up and asked, Sergeant Reynolds, what's going on? I replied, we have the first freed captive from Ben's mission coming in. Do we have a TERP interpreter here? Lieutenant George ordered, someone go wake up the TERP. The doctors and nurses showed up, and I said, we have a young girl, possibly early teens, coming into the hospital. Ben rescued her from the scumsucker assaulters, so she's going to need some medical care. That lit a fire under their butts. They wanted to meet her outside the hospital, but I cautioned, that's not going to happen. However, you can meet her at the door. They met her at the door, and she smiled when she saw the nurses. One of them picked her up, and they hauled to the examination room they set up earlier. The TERP showed up, and I cautioned, that girl has been through more hell than you could imagine. If you traumatize her anymore, I will throw your butt out of the window. He assured me he understood, knocked on the door to the room. A nurse came out and told him he couldn't enter at this time because they were examining the girl. Flashback, Ben, on the mission. I was happy with how the first rescue worked, even though it scared the shit out of the girl when I slit the scumsucker's throat. I didn't hear any weapons fire, so I figured she made it to the hospital fine. I moved toward the next house with the flickering windows and sure as hell didn't like what I heard. There were multiple screams by children and laughing by men. Once again, I slipped up to a hole in the wall which served as a window, slowly slid the nasty-smelling piece of cloth out of the way, and quickly let it close again. I couldn't believe what I saw. Hell, I wish they made eye bleach so I could cleanse my eyes of the image. There were 4 men that I saw, and a cage full of young children in the back of the room. The scumsuckers were pulling the children out one at a time, and having their way with them, and laughing every time they cried. The time for being discreet was long gone because there was no way I could slip in and slit 4 of the scumsuckers' throats. I found the crappy excuse for a door, kicked it in, stormed into the room, and began to shoot the scumsuckers. One of them got close to an AK, but a round from my AK found his forehead first. The children began to whimper until I showed them the American flag on my jacket. Then one asked, in broken English, "American?" I replied, "Yes, American, and I'm here to rescue you." Apparently, he understood more English than he spoke. He rapidly said some words to the other captives, and they calmed down. I explained, "We need to quickly get out of here because the gunfire will bring many other Taliban. We're going to slowly walk toward the hospital with your robes open. There are people at the hospital who will take care of you." He said some words to the other children. Some of the children complained, so I said, "Listen, if we stay here, the Taliban will be here soon." He repeated my words to the children and said, "We trust American. We will go to big hospital." We moved to the door where I motioned for them to wait. Then I pied the doorway to see if we had attracted any other Taliban scumsuckers. I saw a group of them headed toward this piece of shit building, pulled a frag off my vest, yanked the pin, and sent them to their hell. With the way now clear, we slipped outside. I noticed the older boy who spoke some English carried a couple of children. Then I noticed why. The scumsuckers had broken their legs. They began to walk toward the hospital while I followed to make sure the scumsuckers weren't following us. We hadn't gone far when I saw the Taliban, using my NV gear, trying to sneak up on us. I spun, dropped to a knee, and began to send the scumsuckers to hell. My gunfire scared the children, and they began to run, which was the last thing I wanted. I jumped up, ran to the front of them, and motioned for them to stop running. Thank God they stopped, but the Taliban still approached and fired at us. I yelled at the older boy, "Get them to the hospital while I keep the Taliban busy. Whatever you do, don't run, or they might think you are suicide bombers." He whispered to the others, and they headed toward the hospital while I yelled, to distract the scumsuckers from the children, "Hey, shitheads over here." They might not have been able to see me, but they got close to my position just from the sound of my voice. I used my NV gear to flank them, found a short piece of wall to hide behind, took a knee, and waited. Once they got closer, I opened up with my AK and blew them to hell. Unfortunately, there were more of them than I originally realized, and the next thing I knew, I was in a hell of a firefight. I glanced and noticed that I had drawn all the fire from the children, and they were still making their way to the hospital. Then I had a hell of a surprise. Flashback, Jack, at the hospital. A sentry came down from the roof and said, "Sergeant, you need to see this." I dashed up to the roof and saw about 15 children walking toward the hospital with their robes open. It was hard to get an exact number because one of the older boys seemed to be carrying some children. Damn, Ben had hit pay dirt with this mission. The sentry then called my attention to a hell of a firefight going on. I pulled up my binocs and said, "Shit, Ben's in that firefight." I looked at the Marines on the roof and ordered, "The flash on the right is Sergeant Blaine. Don't shoot him. The other flashes are Taliban. Let's light the scumsuckers up." And light the scumsuckers up we did. I pulled up my M25, and even with my NV gear on, I could easily see the Taliban scumsuckers. We had half the sniper team on duty, and they also started firing. Ben jumped up and began to follow the children. I figured out he was the rear guard for them to get to the hospital. A hell of a move, even if it was a little crazy. The children would advance, and Ben would follow up the rear while taking pot shots at the Taliban, who chased the children. Finally, they were in range of the M4S, and we began to make short work of them. I told Todd to go and find the doctors and nurses and tell them we a bunch of children coming in. Todd took off while I ordered, "Make sure to keep the Taliban off Ben." Then I ran downstairs to meet him at the door. Other Marines were already waiting, and they had the doors open as a terrible-looking bunch of children rushed into the hospital. The oldest boy said in broken English, "American man, tell us to come here." Todd did a hell of a job. The doctors and nurses showed up, took one look at the children, and the head doctor said, "We need to tree off these children." Ben finally came in the door, and I said, "What a hell of a mission." But Ben complained, "Jack, I only got to 2 of the buildings. I'm not sure what the scumsuckers are going to do with the other children." I came up with an idea that should fix that problem. Flashback, Jennifer at home. So far, my plan for Daniela and Jed was working perfectly. I needed to figure out the toppings for tonight's pizza and suggested, "Daniela, let's put pineapple and ham on one pizza and pepperoni on the second pizza." Daniela remarked, "Senorita Jennifer, I never would have dreamed of putting piña and jamon on a pizza." I replied, "It's one of my favorites, but if Jed doesn't like it, he can always eat the pepperoni pizza." Daniela asked a very valid question, "Senorita Jennifer, will 2 pizzas be enough for the 4 of us?" I thought for a moment and decided, "I think you're right. We'd better make 3 pizzas." Daniela asked, "What topping will we put on the 3rd pizza?" I smiled and said, "How about just ham?" I thought of something and asked, "Daniela, how do you shop for the food?" She smiled and replied, I take the bus to your home each day, and normally I stop at the Mercado on the way here. Daniela and I went and found Daddy and asked, Daddy, will you take us to the store so we can buy the things needed for pizza tonight? Daddy smiled and said, I hope you're making one with pineapple and ham. I replied, of course we are. Now can we leave? Daddy agreed. We went out, got into the car, and he drove us to the closest grocery store. As usual, Daddy found some friends and was talking to them. We bought the ingredients, including extra flour and yeast, then found Daddy and said, we're ready to go home. We paid for the food, then got in the car and headed back home. I told Daniela, I will be down an hour before dinner to help make the pizza. Then I headed to my room, locked the door, and began to study the book grandmother gave me. Flashback, Alexei at home. Father was not in the new laboratory very long. He came out to the car, smiled at me, and said, Alexei, they hired me and are giving me more money than my old job. I congratulated. Father, that is great news. So when are you starting work? Father replied, next week, Alexei. I determined that we would get you enrolled in the local school, buy all the supplies you will need, and make sure you're ready. I still wasn't sure about going to a public school since I had heard terrible things about them, but I did not want to ruin Father's good mood, so I faked a smile and said, things are going to change for both of us. He was more talkative on the trip home than I remembered him being for a very long time. It was actually annoying. I decided to try one thing, so I asked, Father, do you think it would be possible for me to study at home instead of attending public school? Father ruined my plan when he emphatically stated, no, Alexei, we cannot leave you at home unsupervised for that much time. I continued to dread the thought of attending public school. Flashback, Ira and Mira, continuing. Because my sister Mira foolishly attacked the men, we were up excrement tributary without a skull. They had us pinned behind some rocks with almost constant fire, some of which glanced off the top of the rock. I commanded Mira, we need to flank our adversaries. Mira agreed, yes, my sister, I will traverse to the left while you provide fire of cover. I tried to complain, however Mira did not wait and started her ill-timed traverse. I put the AK over the edge of the rock and spewed some rounds. The Lady of Luck must have smiled because the constant firing abetted. I was emboldened, so I raised my head above the rock, oculated the location of the closest adversary, and terminated him with a volley of projectiles. Once again, the adversaries pelted the rock with projectiles, so I ducked and waited for a lull in the onslaught. Mira fired from the flank location, which distracted the adversaries. I again rose over the rock and terminated another adversary with a hail of leaden projectiles. We continued to work as a team until the final adversary was terminated. Mira walked up to me, and I trounced her derriere and complained, my sister, if you ever do that again, you will not be able to abide on your derriere for many weeks. Flashback, Todd, on the mission. It was all I could do to keep from laughing, if I could laugh. It was obvious to everyone that Maria was very uncomfortable, so I decided to tease her and signed, Maria, what is your problem? Maria complained, Todd, I am not comfortable going to the restaurant in this condition. Gail picked up on my teasing and added some of her own. What condition, my sister? Please do not tell me you are pregnant. Maria vociferously complained, no, Gail, I am not pregnant. What I am is sweaty and I stink. I made a big production of sniffing the air and signed, Maria, you smell much better than I did the first time I came into your bank. Maria agreed, yes, Todd, that is true. You smelled really bad and many customers complained. Gail taunted, I hope they don't complain at the restaurant. I'm hungry, and if they won't. Roberto laughed and interrupted. Do not worry about how you smell. Many of our customers smell worse than you do. Roberto didn't realize it, but he really put his foot in his mouth. Maria complained, Roberto, are you saying I smell bad? Roberto backpedaled, no, Senorita Maria, I would never tell you that. Gail scrunched up her face and lied. Don't worry, sister. I'm not afraid to say that you smell. Maria looked dejected and ordered, Roberto, take me home. I am not hungry. Gail threw a fit and signed, Roberto, do not listen to my sister because I am starving. But without Maria to translate, Roberto turned the car around and we headed back to the house. Present, Ben, Tom, and Mira at the hospital parking lot. Tom laughs at my comment about how both Mira and Ira bother me with their insistence on being with me at all times. Then he teases, I'm surprised at the change in Mira. I thought that she wanted to have your baby. I glare at Tom and answer, she scared the hell out of me. I thought she might be pregnant with my baby, but I had no idea how it could have happened. I'm so thankful that the DNA test put that mess to rest. Tom asks, but you never did the deed with her? I gave him my nastiest look and answer, no way, Tom. In addition, I'm sterile from when I was held captive by the scumsuckers. But Mira thought she had found some of my semen and had in vitro fertilization done with it. It really ended up being the semen from the scumsucker who ran the fertility clinic. I can tell this is a touchy subject for Ben by his looks at me and figure I'd better back off before he kicks my butt. So I comment, well, it's too bad that you and Jennifer can't have kids. Ben shakes his head, looks down, and agrees. Yeah, Jens has always wanted children. My sterility was the reason I fought marrying her for so long. Tom asks, well, what finally convinced you to marry her? I confess, Tom, I've loved the hell out of her for years. It was Destiny who finally convinced me to marry Jens. Tom scoffs, Destiny? Why the hell would she do that? I smile and reply, Tom, it's like I've said before, Jens and I have a destiny together, and Destiny convinced me of the fact. Mira makes it back from the bathroom, sits in the driver's seat of the Cobra, and announces, I do not want to waste the time we have, so I arrive back at the vehicle and inquire, Mr. Blaine, are you ready to continue your lesson? Mr. Blaine takes the passenger seat and replies, that would be great. I was getting bored. I enunciate some words in Russian, repeat the translations in Farsi, and Mr. Blaine repeats the Farsi words. Tom interrupts, part of that sounds like Russian, but I don't recognize the other language. I smile at him and explain, you are correct. The first words were Russian, then I translated them to Farsi. Mr. Blaine gives further information, Mira and Ira are teaching me Farsi. But because of their unique use of the English language, it's easier for them to use the Russian words and then translate them to Farsi. Tom laughs and insults, hell, that's a wise idea since half the time I don't understand what they say when they attempt to speak English. I am slightly miffed, so I respond, Tom, your understandable difficulty is caused of your incorrect use of the English language. Mr. Blaine complains, Mira, we're wasting time arguing with Tom. I instruct, Tom, please do not interrupt the lesson again. However, Tom asks Mr. Blaine, why are you learning Farsi in the first place? I grin evilly at Tom and reply, Tom, if we told you I would have to kill you. Hell's bells. I'm not sure if Mira was teasing or serious about killing me if they told me why Ben is learning Farsi. I figure it's probably better to drop the subject, at least while Mira is around. Present, Liz, Jens, Bernie, and Ira, at the hospital. After my last contraction, I really wanted to push. That lit a fire under the nurse who ran to find the doctor. Bernie cautions, Liz, don't push until the doctor says you can. You know what we learned in the Lamaze class. I swore, Bernie, I'm not so sure that online class was correct, but what I do know is I have a huge desire to push. Bernie continues, Liz, you knew that was coming. Remember what the class said, you would want to push before it was actually time to push. I snap at Bernie, I don't care, and on the next contraction, I'm going to push. Jens comes over, takes my hand and says, Liz doesn't know it, but I also took the same online Lamaze class that they did. I wanted to be as much help as possible to Liz during the delivery. I take Liz's hand and say, Liz, Bernie's right. The class said you would want to push before it was time. Liz asks, and how would you know that? I smile at Liz and reply, because I took the same online class that you did as why. Liz complains, why the hell did you do that? I smile at her and say, so I could help you, of course. Now don't you dare try to push until the doctor says it's okay. Liz grimaces as the next contraction starts. I know I need to do something, so I begin an incantation that should take away the urge for her to push. Liz finishes the contraction and says, well, that one was certainly different since I didn't have any urge to push at all. The nurse comes back with the doctor. The doctor puts Liz's feet into the stirrups on the table and begins to check her. Then he announces, Elizabeth, things are progressing well with your labor, but it's not time to push yet. Liz whines, Doctor, when will I be able to push? The doctor smiles and says, it will probably be another hour before you can begin to push. Liz swears, son of a bitch. I'm not sure I can wait that long. I smile at Liz and try to comfort her. Liz, don't worry. An hour is nothing compared to the 9 months you've carried the baby. I'm thankful the incantation to stop the urge to push works. I have been observing Ms. Blaine and have noticed her actions. While she isn't doing anything to decrease the pain, she did appear to do something to remove the urge of Liz Morgan's to push. I walk beside Ms. Blaine and whisper in her ear, Ms. Blaine, are you preventing the urge to push? Ms. Blaine directs her cranial carapace toward me, smiles and whispers, yes, Ira. While I cannot remove Liz's pain or it would interfere with the birth, I can temporarily remove the urge to push. I return to my location adjacent to the door and marvel that my sister and I were so lucky to have a friend like Ms. Blaine. She is not like Baba Yaga. In Slavic folklore, Baba Yaga is a supernatural being, or one of a trio of sisters of the same name, who appears as a deformed and/or ferocious-looking woman. Baba Yaga flies around in a mortar, wields a pestle, and dwells deep in the forest in a hut usually described as standing on chicken legs. At all. Present, Samantha, on the way back to Leadville. We make it to Leadville, head into the office, and it looks like it was hit by a hurricane. Bill swears, those sons of a bitches really made a mess out of things. God, I hate Phoebes. I reply, they seem to treat me okay. Bill replies, that's because you're a woman and several of them are sort of interested in you. I laugh and counter, yeah, right. Bill answers, you just wait. Soon they will start asking you for dates. I giggle and say, I sure hope some of them do, because I haven't been on a date forever. Bill struggles to put things in the room back into order, and I volunteer, don't worry about the room. Vic and I will take care of it. Bill asks, that reminds me, where's Vic? I smile and say, he stayed here to keep an eye on things while you were gone. I look at John and continue. John, can you give Vic a call and let him know we're in the office? John makes the call and says, Vic will be here in a few minutes. He's dealing with something right now. Bill asks, do you know what Vic is dealing with? John says, I didn't ask, but it didn't sound important. I begin to move the desks, tables, and other items back where they belong. John lends a hand. We come across a pile of papers. Bill comes over and says, hey, they left the information Stacy researched about Jennifer Blaine being a witch. He retrieves the pile from us and begins to look at them until Vic strolls in and Bill asks, Vic, what were you doing? Vic smiles and says, I was finishing breakfast. Damn, this place is a real mess. I reply, you should have seen it before we started cleaning it up. Bill suggests, Samantha, now that Vic is here, he can clean things up while you and I read through this interesting information on Jennifer Blaine being a witch. I don't want Bill to know about my dyslexia, so I counter, Bill, I would rather help Vic. I will read that later. Bill motions to me, so I walk beside him and he whispers, Samantha, I know about your difficulty, Stacy told me. I blush and begin to get angry when he continues whispering, don't worry about it. Miss Summers told me, so we could find you someone to help. I whisper a reply, well, why haven't I had someone to help me then? Bill smiles and explains, we were all set up, but then things went to hell with Miss Summers. Now why don't you sit down and I will read this to you. From the looks of things, Miss Summers might be right. Vic and John continue to clean the room up. I sit by Bill and I can't believe what he reads to me. It's either true or one of the best concocted stories I've ever heard. Present, Stacy, alone. I'm resting again because there's nothing else to do in this damn cell. Once again the agents arrive, make me face the wall, and put the shackles on me. I ask, where are we going now? The agents say, to meet with your lawyers. That's music to my ears since it means that Bill must have called in some favors. They lead me to a room, shackle me to the table, and then my lawyers come in and the agents caution, make sure you do not give her anything. My lawyers agree. They sit down and the lead counsel says, damn Miss Summers, you really made a mess out of things this time. It was all we could do to get them to drop the provisions of the Patriot Act. Just what were you thinking calling terrors on the Blaines? I smile at my lawyers and reply, I discovered that Jennifer the bitch Blaine is a witch. So I hoped they would take care of her for me. The lead counsel shakes his head and says, Miss Summers, that's the craziest story I've ever heard. I thought the psych hospital cured you of your obsession with Ben Blaine. I defend myself. They did until I discovered that the bitch is a witch. I'm sure she put some sort of love spell on Ben, so he only loves her. He says, I'm not sure if you're looking for an insanity plea again this time, but that's what I think we should try. I complain, just make sure I don't go back to the same nut house as last time. It almost made me crazy. The lead counsel changes the subject. How are they treating you here? I shake the shackles and complain, these are a real pain in the butt. He answers, sorry, but you have to live with that for the time being. We were lucky Bill called us before they sent you to Guantanamo. If that had happened, we wouldn't have been able to see you at all. We need to get going and work on your defense. I feel better after talking to my lawyers. The agents came into the room, take me back to my cell, and remove the shackles. Present, Tom, Ben, and Mira, at the hospital parking lot. My phone rings, I answer it, and get the bad news about Stacy Summers' lawyers. I end the call and swear, those sons of a bitch. Ben stops his lesson and asks, what's going on, Tom? I frown and reply, I can't believe it. Stacy Summers' lawyers got the judge to drop the Patriot Act provisions on her. Ben asks, don't tell me she's getting out? I smile and reply, not no, but hell no. We still have her conspiring with known terrors. Mira looks at Ben and suggests, Mr. Blaine, it would be trivial to terminate her. I counter, she's in a maximum security prison, so I doubt you could do that. Mira just grins and says, Tom, prisons are designed to keep people inside, not to keep people from entering. Ben vociferously declares, Mira, there's no way in hell I want you killing Stacy, so drop it. I'm thankful that at least Ben has kept his senses about him. I have to confess, Mira and Ira scare the shit out of me. Flashback, Masha and Louise, home again. We returned to the furniture store, finished shopping for furniture for Louise's room, and of course bought a few things for Linda while we were at it. We made it back to the house, and I was shocked when we arrived. Television news vans lined the streets. Louise stated the obvious, Annie Masha, it looks like the television stations have finally figured out your home address. I complained, this is the last thing I want to deal with today. Then I noticed the police are back in front of my house, so I looked at Louise and asked, Louise, will you please ask the police to make the television stations leave? Louise laughed. No way, Annie Masha. You need to get used to being the hero that you are. But don't worry, I will talk to them for you. Whatever she said, it must have appeased the television station since they filmed me a little and then packed up and left. Louise came back to the truck and said, Don't worry, Masha. I told them we needed to move the furniture, so they agreed to leave until later when they plan on interviewing you. I complained. Louise, why would you tell them that? I don't want to talk to them. Louise said, Masha, it's the only way to get them to leave you alone. Give them an interview, and then our lives can get back to normal. We moved the new furniture into Louise and Linda's room. It looked great and smelled so much better than her old furniture. Louise shocked me when she said, I sure hope this Ben doesn't expect me to sleep with him in return for this new furniture. I countered, Louise, Ben is a great guy, and I'm sure he would never expect you to. Louise giggled and interrupted. Annie Masha, I was teasing you. But it's too bad he's such a gentleman because I haven't had sex in a very long time. I blushed. Louise giggled even more and declared, I gotcha, Annie Masha. However, I wasn't sure she was totally teasing me. Then I remembered, I need to call the base and complain about the police not providing security for our house. I took out the little notepad I wrote everything in, looked up the number, and called the base. After a short wait, I talked to the base commander and explained, Sir, I hate to bother you, but the police have not been supplying me with security as you said they would. He replied, Sorry, Ms. Reynolds. I was concerned this might happen, but don't worry. I will make some calls and it won't happen again. By the way, I saw the television interviews featuring you, and I would like to say that you handled yourself well against the police department even though they had batons. I replied, Thank you, sir. I couldn't let them beat the defenseless women. Some of the women are still dealing with their injuries. He asked, It looked like you used Krav Maga on them? I replied, Yes, sir. I learned it in Russia from some IDF forces who were visiting. He verified, Ms. Reynolds, unless you need something else, I would like to finish this call. I thanked him. No, sir. Thank you very much for taking the time to listen to me. I hung up the phone and said he's going to make some calls. Louise said, I bet he's going to cancel the leaves for all the soldiers. I asked, why would he do that? Louise said, Annie Masha, you might not know it, but this town survives off the money the soldiers on leave spend at their businesses. If he cancels all the leaves, it will financially impact the town. I continued with my questions. Has the base commander done this before? Louise grinned and said, Oh yeah. The last time the base commander did it, things were so bad in town that Michael had to close the store for the whole week. I queried, why did the commander do it last time? Louise replied, some of the Marine recruits were beaten up in a bar and the police didn't do anything about it. I voiced serious concern. I would say there is a large problem with the police department in this. Louise asked, Masha, what is a Gorodok? I apologize. Sorry, Louise, sometimes I forget and speak Russian. Is a slang word for a small town or village. It is not a kind word to use. Louise agreed. Yeah, the police here are pretty crummy, but I guess it beats not having any police at all. I counter, Louise, after watching the police beat defenseless women with their batons today, I seriously disagree with you. The police are not doing their job, and by their inaction are actually making matters worse. Louise smiled at me and said, Masha, you need to say this in your television interviews. I frowned and complained, Louise, I'm not doing the interview. The doorbell rang. Louise checked and said, Masha, you are too late because the television reporters are here again. I swore, I'm not ready for this. Louise, however, opened the door and invited the reporters into our living room. Flashback, Jack and Ben at the hospital. Ben's mission was a huge success, but he was concerned that he only reached 2 houses, and so was I. I suggested, Ben, since the scumsuckers don't have any NV gear, we rule the night. So why don't we form a squad and you lead them on night missions? That way you could cover more houses. Ben frowned and explained, Jack, that's a possibility, but if we go in with guns blazing, some of the children will get killed, either by us or by the Taliban. I asked, didn't you do that on the second house? Ben reluctantly agreed. Yeah, I wanted to take them out one at a time with my K-bar, but there were too many of them, so I was forced to shoot them. I replied, Ben, what do you expect? This isn't a recon team. Ben smiled, snapped his fingers and stated, Jack, that's exactly what we need here, a recon team. Why don't you get on the horn with Colonel Maggie and see if we have any available? I complained, Ben, it's the middle of the night. He interrupted. Good, she makes the big bucks so she can get woken up. Lieutenant George showed up and asked an obvious question. Are these children that Ben freed? I came up with an idea and suggested. Yes, sir, they are, and they came from only 2 houses. I think that Colonel Maggie should be told about this immediately. Ben also suggested that we see if there were any more recons available so that we could cover more houses before the Taliban begin to kill the children. Lieutenant George asked, Sergeant Reynolds, couldn't this wait until morning? I replied, of course it could, sir. However, with us starting to free the children, the Taliban might get worried and start to kill them before we have a chance for a rescue. Lieutenant George took off like his, but was on fire. Ben grinned at the exchange with Lieutenant George and said, I knew Jack didn't want to wake up Colonel Maggie, and it was a stroke of genius to get George to do it for us. I complimented his action. Jack, it really is good to have you here. Good job with Lieutenant George. Jack replied, Hell Ben, Lieutenant George wants all the credit for everything here, so we might as well let him also take the credit for waking up Colonel Maggie. I asked, when do you think he will wise up? Jack replied, I hope not before he wakes up Colonel Maggie and she rips him a new a-hole. One of the doctors showed up and said, Sergeant Blaine, I would like to commend you on rescuing the children. They are severely malnourished and have been terribly abused and will greatly benefit from our treatment. I said, No problem, sir. I just wish I could have rescued more. The doctor replied, More? Hell, we can barely handle the ones you already recovered. I smiled and suggested, Lieutenant George is on the horn with Colonel Maggie. Perhaps he could ask for more doctors and nurses to help you. The doctor headed toward the comm room. I looked at Jack and said, Listen, I only got to 2 houses, so I'm going to head back out and see if I can't rescue more children before the Taliban start killing them. Jack started to complain. Ben. I interrupted. Jack, it's not going to do any good. I've made up my mind, and I'm going. I put on my NV gear and slipped back out into the night. Flashback, Ben, on another mission. I was stoked by the success of my first 2 missions and knew that if we waited too long the Taliban would start killing the children. I was surprised when I came back out of the hospital because the idiots hadn't gone back to their hovel houses and they were wandering around like chickens with their heads cut off. Then it hit me. Without NV gear or flashlights, the stupid scumsuckers were lost in the dark. This was perfect for me, so I slipped up on the closest one. My K-bar found his neck, and like the Queen's song says, another one bites the dust. I moved toward the next closest scumsucker, then things went to hell. First I heard a whump that sounded like artillery, and the next thing I knew a flare lit up the area like it was Christmas. Of course the Taliban saw me, so I dropped the K-bar, took a knee, spun the AK around on its sling, and began to fire. When I found out which stupid scumsucker called for a flare round from the artillery, I was going to kick there, but my aim was more accurate than the aim of the Taliban, so soon they were all dead. However, there was still too much light from the flare for me to continue my mission, so I hauled back to the hospital. Flashback, Jack, at the hospital. Hell's bells. The artillery lit up the area with a flare. Even though he had to be shocked, I watched as Ben expertly took out the remaining Taliban who were still out of their houses. Then he began to haul back to the hospital. I dashed to the comm room where George was on the horn, and I complained. Who the hell called the artillery for a flare? Lieutenant George confessed, I did that, Sergeant Reynolds. What's the problem? I palmed my face and stated, the problem is Ben was out taking care of the remaining Taliban, and your foolish action near got him killed. Lieutenant George attempted a defense. Colonel Maggie thought it would be a good idea. I asked, is she still on the comm? Lieutenant George replied, no, she's gone, and now we have the head of medicine. I bit my tongue to keep from saying what I really wanted to say, and instead said, Sir, next time you get a bright idea like that, you might want to check with me first. I knew I'd better meet Ben at the door because he would kill Lieutenant George when he found out he called for the flare. I made it to the hospital entrance just as Ben rolled in. He began to swear, who is the son of a bitch who called for the flare round? I'm going to kick their butt. I grabbed Ben by the arms and said, Ben, Lieutenant George did it after Colonel Maggie suggested it. Don't worry, I've taken care of it, and it won't happen again. I heard from behind me, sorry Ben, I was stupid and called in the flare round after Colonel Maggie suggested it. Thanks to Sergeant Reynolds, I now understand and will never do that again. Ben looked at me and asked, Jack, is it too late to tear up the re-enlistment papers? I lied. Yeah, Ben, it's too late since they were sent to HQ already. Then I added, Ben, the flare is gone if you want to head back out. He glared at Lieutenant George and stated, good, that's exactly what I'm going to do. But keep him from calling in any more flares. Lieutenant George wisely replied, don't worry, I'm not going to do that again. The older boy who came in with the last group of children came up and offered, if the American is going to save more children, I would like to help. Ben stated, sorry, but you are a civilian and I'm not going to endanger your life again. The boy argued, please let me come. You do not speak our language and the other children will be afraid of you. Lieutenant George added, Sergeant Blaine, he makes a good point. Ben asked, if you come, you will have to follow my orders and also not make any noise. The boy assured me, yes, follow orders and I keep quiet like mouse. Ben and the boy left. Lieutenant George asked, Sergeant Reynolds, why did you lie to Ben about his re-enlistment papers? I countered, would you rather let Ben tear them up and deal with Colonel Maggie over it? I could see the light bulb above his head as Lieutenant George complimented my action. Good thinking, Sergeant Reynolds. Flashback, Jennifer, at home. There was a knock at my door. I woke up and realized I'd fallen asleep. I quickly hid the book and asked, "Who is it?" Daniela said, "Senorita Jennifer, I think it is time to make the pizza." I looked at my watch and realized that dinner was less than an hour away and knew we would have to hurry if we were going to make the pizza in time. I rushed to the door, unlocked it, and apologized. "Sorry, Daniela, I accidentally fell asleep. But if we hurry, we should still have enough time to make the pizza." We dashed downstairs to the kitchen, and I began to make the pizza dough. Daniela remembered my instructions from last time and really helped. I commented, "Thank you, Daniela. With your help, we should have no trouble having things ready for when your boyfriend shows up." Daniela scolds me, "Senorita Jennifer, please do not call Jed my boyfriend. He is not my novio, he is my amigo." I asked for clarification. "Daniela, I thought novio was fiancé or husband." Daniela clarified, "Esposo is husband and novio can be boyfriend or fiancé." I complained, "Daniela, sometimes Spanish is confusing because they use the same word for many things." She chuckled and replied, "Senorita Jennifer, you need to not try literal translations, you need to listen to the whole sentence and then translate it." We had the dough ready, so I left it to rise some while I started on the sauce. To make things faster, I used the food processor to liquefy the tomatoes and the garlic. With the sauce cooking, I went back to the dough and prepared the crusts. Once they were ready, I added the sauce, the toppings, and then put the pizzas into the preheated ovens. Flashback, Alexei at home. After father had the successful interview for the new job, we didn't drive straight home, but instead he took me to the local school. We had a meeting with the principal, who said to my father, "Sir, it is highly unusual to enroll your son now, without records from a previous school." Father countered, "Sir, my son has been privately schooled and is a remarkable student." The principal said, "Sir, many parents say that about their children. Therefore, your son will need to take some tests so we can be sure which grade he should attend." Father asked, "When can Alexei take those tests?" The principal offered, "How about now?" Father looked at me and asked, "Alexei, do you feel comfortable taking the tests now?" I smiled at father and replied, "Yes, father, now is perfect." The principal said, "Alexei, we will start you with 7th grade material." He gave me the 7th grade tests. I looked at them and replied, "Sir, I know the answer to all these questions." The principal suggested, "Well then, let's give you the 8th grade tests to look at." I looked at them and repeated, "This material is too easy for me." The principal said, "Alexei even thought this material seems easy. Please answer the questions." I easily answered the questions and handed the tests back to the principal. He checked them and stated, "Alexei, you answered all the questions perfectly." I was bored and replied, "Yes, I know I did." The principal gave me the other grade tests, and I continued to examine them until I found one that interested me. I began to answer it and discovered it wasn't as difficult as I thought. I handed the test back to the principal and said, "You can check this, but all the answers are correct." He of course checked it and confirmed, "Alexei, I am amazed you did answer all the questions correctly." Then he looked at father and said, "Sir, your son just passed the 12th grade test with a perfect score. Unfortunately, we can't school him here." Father asked, "Why is that?" "You said he passed the test." The principal explained, "That's exactly the problem. Our school only goes up to the 12th grade. Alexei is ready for college-level courses." Father replied with exasperation, "Well, what should I do?" The principal wrote something on a notepad, handed it to my father, and said, "I would contact this college and see if they will accept him." Then he handed my last test to father and said, "Make sure you give them this test. I must say, you have done an exceptional job teaching your son." Father shook hands with the principal. We went out to the car and father asked, "Well, Alexei, would you like to go look at the college?" I yawned and replied, "Father, could we do it tomorrow? I'm a little sleepy and a lot hungry." Father said, "Sure, Alexei, let's find someplace to eat, and then we can go home and you can take a nap." While we were eating, I thought about going to college and became worried since I knew I would be the youngest person in college, so I developed another plan. Flashback, Mira and Ira, continuing. I vociferously complained, "Ira, why did you assault me?" Ira glared at me and berated, "Miranda, have you lost your sanity?" Attacking Costia's men without waiting for my assistance was futility in exercise. I picked myself up and taunted, "Ira, sometimes you remind me of an old woman. You have to abide for the moment." Ira threatened, "Mira, if you continue with your tomfoolery, you may abide for the moment without my assistance. I do question if your cranial carapace has been permanently injured from your alcohol consumption." I wanted to tell Ira that she was the one who imbibed excessive alcohol, but I did not desire another trouncing, so I kept silent. Flashback, Todd, on the mission. We arrived at the house, and Roberto said, "Maria, please forgive me. I did not mean to imply that you smelled bad." Gail once again insulted Maria when she signed, "My sister, Roberto is just being kind. You do smell." Maria had too much and began to cry, so I signed. Gail, I hope you are happy now. Look what you've done. Gail tried to apologize to Maria, but Maria wouldn't look at her. We exited the car, walked into the house, and Gail signed. Todd, I'm still starving. I angrily signed. Gail, after what you did to your sister, I really don't care. Go to your room and leave us alone. Gail stormed upstairs to her room while I held Maria and tried to comfort her. Present, Tom, Mira, Ben, Jens, and Ira, at the hospital parking lot. I'm not sure why Ben and Jennifer don't want me knowing about their next mission, but my guess is that it's something that my superiors might not look favorably upon. Mira instructs Jennifer, Ms. Blaine, with the Farsi lesson terminated for the day, we can commence your Russian lessons. Please acquire this vehicle's additional seat. Jennifer takes the passenger seat, and then the fun begins. Ms. Blaine relieves Mr. Blaine of his location in the vehicle, so we might start her Russian lessons. I have great concern because this mission will be difficult enough without Ms. Blaine causing additional issues because of her inadequacy in certain skills. I am not certain it was wise for Mr. Blaine to relent to his wife's wishes. In English I ask, Ms. Blaine, can you converse in Russian? She insults me by answering, I speak Russian better than you speak English. I glare at her and complain in Russian. Your Russian has an English accent which we will need to repair. Ms. Blaine further complains, Mira, why does that matter? Mr. Blaine approaches the vehicle and rescues me by saying, I knew that Jens and Mira were going to go at it since Jens is convinced that Mira and Ira need to learn to speak English correctly. I of course realize they never will. I wish Jens would also realize the fact. Whoever taught them English majorly screwed them up, and they have spoken the incorrect way for such a long time. Now, because they don't perceive a problem, there's simply no hope of retraining them. I walk up to the passenger side of the car where Jens is sitting and state, Jens, you will learn to speak Russian without an English accent or you won't come on the mission. Jens begins to complain, so I lean down and whisper in her ear, Jens, this is important to me, so please don't fight me on this. She smiles at me and says, okay, Ben, I will do this for you. But would it be possible for you to teach me Russian instead of depending on the twins? Mira chimes in, yes, Mr. Blaine. It would be better if you instructed Ms. Blaine in the Russian language. I take a page from Mira and Ira by stating, Jens, I can personally train you only if we set aside a specific time each day for your lessons. Jens complains, geez, Ben, the next thing you know you will schedule our whole day. Mira expounds, Ms. Blaine, that is an excellent idea. I would be happy to help you and Mr. Blaine arrange a schedule. Jens practically explodes. Mira, there's no way in heck that's going to happen. I can't believe it when Mira actually taunts. What is wrong, Ms. Blaine? Are you concerned I will not include enough time for your much too frequent copulations? Tom laughs and remarks, now that would certainly spoil the mood, having to make love on a schedule. Things begin to get out of hand when Jens adds a taunt of her own. Ben, it might not be such a bad idea since I could use about 15 minutes every hour for personal activities. Tom continues with the laughing and Mira complains, Ms. Blaine, I do not feel that Mr. Blaine would be up for the onerous task that frequently. That comment practically has Tom rolling on the ground with laughter. Mira looks perplexed and asks, did I produce an expression of humor? Jens leans over, and I assume she explains to Mira the double entendre behind what she said, and Mira actually blushes. Tom states, damn, this is almost as good as the who's on first joke. Mira of course asks, who is on first? Tom laughs and replies, yes, who's on first? Mira complains, I do not know who is on first. Tom continues, no, I don't know is on third. Mira shakes her head, and Jens saves us. I'm sure as hell not going through this whole bovine excrement joke with Tom and Mira, so I hold up my hand and order, Tom, let me borrow your phone. Tom hands me his phone. I search the internet and find a YouTube video of the Abbott and Costello joke. Mira and I watch it together, and Mira remarks, that imparted no sense to me. Tom still laughs and says, I would have bet money on that. That reminds me, Jennifer, what did we win for being right about the baby being a girl? I give Ben a sexy hot look with a wink and reply, well, Tom, I know what I want, but I'm not sure what you want. Tom asks, Jennifer, what do you want? Ben quickly interjects, Tom, you don't want to know what Jens wants. And even though I'm not drinking anymore, I will buy you a bottle of booze. I suggest, Ben, you could get Tom a bottle of champagne that he can share with Inga. Ben says, that's a great idea. Tom complains, like hell it is. Inga and I might be back together, but we're taking it slow. I tease, what's wrong, Tom? Are you afraid you can't be up that frequently? Mira joins in and taunts, I have heard that at extreme ages, such as that possessed by Tom, many men can no longer be up. Tom swears, leave it to you women to drag the conversation into the gutter. I don't have to stand for this, so I'm leaving. Tom leaves. I look at Mira, and we both begin to giggle. Ira arrives at the parking lot and informs all, the infant girl's name is Maria. I palm my face and complain, Ira, that means we now have 2 Jennifers and 2 Mariahs. Before Ira can answer, Mira says, my sister, Mr. Blaine has allowed Ms. Blaine to participate on the mission. I was sure that Ms. Blaine would not attend this mission since she will be a serious liability. I wish Mr. Blaine would have consulted me first. I complain, Ms. Blaine, you are not suitable for this mission. Ms. Blaine responds, like hell I'm not. We've already dealt with the 2 issues. The first being my eye color. I will be Mr. Blaine's Russian wife, and the second being my American accent when I speak Russian, because Ben is going to help me lose the accent. You both need to know that where Ben goes, I go. I add one further stipulation, Ms. Blaine. If you are coming on this mission, your martial arts skills must improve. Ms. Blaine counters, Ira, why is that important? It doesn't sound like you will be performing any hand-to-hand combat. Mr. Blaine interjects, Jens, don't worry about it since you'll be a natural for Muay Thai, so we can add that to our training regime. We can even get Destiny to train you like she trained me if you would like. Ms. Blaine crows akin to a rooster, good. Then perhaps I can beat Ira and Mira in martial arts. I finally allow myself to submit to a radical thought and state, so Mr. Blaine, Destiny taught you Muay Thai while you traversed the Rocky Mountain Trail. Mr. Blaine confirms, that's correct, Ira. We needed something to do in the evenings that would keep us warm. I postulate, it would be most interesting to challenge Destiny to a martial arts contest. Mr. Blaine gives a hearty laugh. Yeah, why don't you do that? She would easily defeat both of you simultaneously. Mira casts doubt on that aspersion. Mr. Blaine, I highly doubt any one person could defeat both of us. Mr. Blaine continues with mirth and suggests, I will ask her if she is interested. I inquire, Mr. Blaine, if she is such a valuable asset, perhaps she should come in the mission instead of Ms. Blaine. Ms. Blaine gives an explosive response. Ira, have you forgotten what happens when you make me angry? I smile at her and remind her, Ms. Blaine, we know your martial arts cannot defeat us. Ms. Blaine threatens, that might be true, Ira, but did you forget about what I did for Mira at the clinic and also about Yasmin and Zarika? Mr. Blaine asks a clueless question. Jens, what are you talking about? Ms. Blaine says, Ben, not right now. We will discuss this later. I understand Ms. Blaine's threat and realize it is not a threat of idle, and also realize that because of her unique abilities, she could be a substantial asset on the mission, so I recant. Ms. Blaine, you are correct. If you are on the mission, you would convey other assets for our benefit. Mr. Blaine asks, how many people could I have as wives? Because if Destiny came, that would be 4. Ms. Blaine foolishly complains, for frickin' wives. Ben, that's some sort of harem that I'm not going to stand for. I lean close to Ms. Blaine and whisper, Ms. Blaine, you do not fully understand the parameters of the mission. For us to accompany your husband, we would have to pose as his wives. But in name only. Mira interjects a valid point, for wives would not be unheard of in current times. However, we will need to instruct Ms. Blaine on behavior appropriate for a proper wife. I continue with the idea, yes, Ms. Blaine, you will need to know your proper place and always walk behind Mr. Blaine. Ms. Blaine begins once again to become upset, so I change the subject and suggest, Ms. Blaine, you might want to voice your concerns over the baby's name. She agrees, that's a great idea. She then departs for the hospital to converse with the maternal unit. I notice with more than minimum concern that Tom has been listening to the entire conversation. Present, Liz, Bernie, and Jens at the hospital. We're holding little Maria when Jens walks into the room, smiles at us, and says, you two make beautiful babies. However, you might want to change the name. I ask Jens, why's that? Maria is a beautiful name. Jens says, did you two forget about my former girl Friday Maria? I swear, son of a... Bernie interrupts me by saying, was not in front of the baby. I giggle and continue, son of a sea biscuit, I did forget about that. But she seems to like Maria. Jens suggests, Liz, there are many great girl names. How about Katniss? I blink and ask, you mean like that actress in the Hunger Games movies? Jens affirms, that's the one. Bernie shoots it down by saying, I don't care for those movies and I sure don't want my daughter having the name of the bitch that starred in the move, so I complain, I don't know if my vote counts for anything, but I'm going to veto that idea anyway. Liz asks, Bernie, you haven't been much help coming up with names. How about some of the women in your family? I shake my head and say, not unless you want to stick her with a real old-fashioned name like Penelope or Matilda. Liz looks at Jens and I can't believe what she asks. Jens, would you mind if we named her after your mother, Evelyn? Jens shakes her head and says, Liz, please don't name her that. It would be a constant reminder. Liz interrupts. Right, Jens, I understand. Sorry I asked. I decide to tease them some, so I again suggest, I know, what about Stacy? Both Liz and Jens simultaneously attack. There's no way we're naming her that. I would never hold her if she was given that biatch's name. Liz complains, I never thought that naming a baby would be so difficult. Jens suggests, here's a unique name that I've always liked. How about Desiree? I reply, that's a great name. Liz agrees. Yeah, I like that one too. Liz looks at our little girl and says, so what do you think? Do you like Desiree? Present, Samantha, in Stacy's offices. Vic and I take the van to the airport, and the chopper is ready to go since Bill had called them already. The pilot asks, so we're headed to the same building as last time? Vic assures him, that's correct. The pilot gives some good information. Great. I talked to them when we landed on their heliport last time, and I have the radio frequency to call them on, so we won't have problems this time. We sit back and enjoy the flight, and in no time are at the agency building. The pilot calls on the frequency he was given. We listen in on the headset as he's given clearance to land, but they tell him he will need to wait for a few minutes because they have another chopper coming in. The pilot moves off as we see this huge twin-bladed chopper come in and land on the roof. The pilot remarks over the intercom, damn, that's a CH-47 Chinook. I wonder what the hell they are bringing in on it. It barely touches down. The back opens like a clamshell, and a whole SWAT team bails out of the back of the chopper. Vic remarks, damn, those guys know what they're doing. I haven't seen teamwork like that since I was in the sandbox. I wonder out loud, perhaps we're missing a story. The CH-47 Chinook leaves. We land and are met by one of the agents who apologizes. Sorry you had to wait. I give him a big smile and ask, what was an FBI SWAT team doing landing at this building? The agent tells an obvious lie. It was just a training mission. I pull my tablet out of my backpack and begin to check the other stations, but so far none of them have any emergency reports. The agent orders, Samantha, you will need to put the tablet away while you're in the building. I smile at him, shut it down, and put it back in my pack. He begins to escort us inside and says, I'm assuming you're here to see Stacy Summers. I reply, you're right, we would like to see her. He states, Samantha, you can see her, however your bodyguard will need to wait in a private office. Vic hands over all his weapons and says, I bet you want these too? The agent says, thanks. That was coming next. They take Vic to his room and escort me into a different room. It takes some time until they finally bring Stacy in. She's in shackles, and they shackle her to the table. The agent who brought her in warns, we will be watching, so please don't attempt to touch each other. Stacy smiles at me, and I ask, how are they treating you? She yells, the scumsuckers are treating me like shit. I'm shocked by her answer. Then she smiles and says, don't worry, Sam. I was giving them a bad time. Things are as good as they can be. I mention Stacy, Bill, and I read the information on Jennifer being a witch. Stacy interrupts. You mean the witch bitch? I continue. The evidence is pretty damning, but there's a huge problem. Stacy smiles and says, I know it's damning. So what's the problem? I try to explain. Stacy, I don't have any idea what to do with it. I really can't do a broadcast on this. I would be laughed off the air. Do you have any idea what to do with the material? Stacy looks disappointed and says, yeah, I guess you really can't do a report on it. But just having you and Bill believe me means the world to me. I give Stacy my follow-up idea. I thought I would take the plane and head to New Orleans to see if I can get any more ideas on how to deal with this. Stacy smiles and says, Sam, that's a great idea since there are many voodoo priests down there. Perhaps you can find something to cancel the love spell the witch bitch put on Ben. I wasn't sure that Jennifer had put a love spell on Ben, but I smile and reply, well, I need to get moving on this. Is there anything you need? Stacy says, I would love to give you a hug, but I know we can't. I smile at her and say, I will let you know what I find out after I return from the trip. The agent comes and pats down Stacy to make sure I didn't pass anything to her. They take her out, and the other agent comes and escorts me toward the helipad. We pick up Vic on the way. We get to the roof, and the agent asks, Samantha, I don't suppose that you would consider going on a date with me sometime? I smile at him and tell him the truth. Sorry, but I'm still recovering from my divorce. Feel free to ask again in about 6 or 7 months. We climb into the chopper, and Vic teases, I knew sooner or later they were going to start hitting you up for dates. We take off. I pull out my tablet and swear, I knew something was going on. I asked the pilot whether can we head over to the Denver Mint, since that's where the SWAT team we saw was headed. He replies, of course we can, but the problem is there's no place to land. Vic suggests we should land back on the heliport and take ground transportation to the scene. The pilot makes the call. We land and are met by the agent again who asks, don't tell me you changed your mind? I smile at him and say, nope. But we finally found out where your SWAT team went and are heading there ourselves. I could tell he wasn't happy as he escorted us downstairs and asks the desk, please call Miss Stevens a taxi. It doesn't take long for the taxi to arrive, but then we ran into hellacious traffic getting to the Mint. We were still more than 10 blocks from the Mint when Vic suggests, the traffic isn't going anywhere, so we should run. I agree. Pay the driver. We jump out of the taxi and Vic asks, where's your camera? I reach into my backpack, pull out a Sony PXWFS 5K, 4K handheld camera, hand it to Vic and order, you're going to be my camera operator. I give him quick instructions on how to run the camera and begin my report. Flashback, Masha and Louise, the interview. I was very upset at Louise, not only for inviting the television crews to come back, but then she actually let them into our living room. I was surprised they didn't bring in a truckload of equipment and get the living room rug all dirty. Instead, it was 3 reporters and 3 individuals who carried cameras. Even though I did not want this, I was still a proud Russian woman, and it behooved me to offer them some tea or something else to drink. I politely inquired, "I am preparing some tea. Would you like some, or would you possibly prefer something else to drink?" I could tell from the looks on their faces they were surprised. I guess this was not a custom in America, and one lady replied, "I would love a cup of tea if it's no bother." I smiled at her and replied, "It is not a bother at all since it is customary to offer guests something to drink when they arrive at your house." I put water in the electric teapot, turned it on, and returned to the living room. I then opened the curio cabinet, withdrew my Lomonosov tea set, and moved it into the kitchen adjacent to the teapot. The reporter who asked for the tea suggested, "Perhaps we should start the interview?" I fought back my instinct to run to my bedroom, but instead placed a fake smile on my face and said, "Now is good. However, we will need to stop when the water boils. Where would you like to place me for the interview?" The reporter suggested, "Why don't you sit on the couch, and we will bring over the chair if you do not mind." Then something interesting happened as the reporters began to argue about where I should sit and who should begin. I allowed this continue for about 2 minutes, then I interrupted, "Excuse me. This is my home, and I do not like all the strife that you are causing. If you do not behave, I will require you to leave without an interview." They stopped, looked at me, and apologized. "We're sorry. Please don't make us leave without an interview. How would you like us to conduct the interview?" I looked at them and said, "First, we will not do 3 different interviews. We will only do 1 interview." They began to complain and argue again, so I demanded, "Please leave my house." They stopped the noise, and the reporter who asked for the tea said, "I'm sorry, Ms. Reynolds, but we're not used to having to deal with such a strong woman as you. Please forgive us, and if we are allowed to stay, we promise to behave." The teapot was finished. I looked at the 3 of them and said, "I see that you each carry tablet devices which I assume contain the questions you wish to ask me. Since I am only doing 1 interview, you will need to combine the lists of questions into 1 list. Then you may each ask 1 question at a time, and if I approve of the question, I will answer it. If I do not approve the question, I will not answer it." I moved to the kitchen as they began to work out the list between them. I made the tea in the teapot, brought it on a tray, placed it on the coffee table in front of the couch, and asked once again, "I have enough tea for everyone. Are you sure you do not want tea?" They all agreed to have tea, so I prepared the tea for each of them, handed them the cup on a saucer, and remarked, "I don't use sugar, however there is sugar in the bowl on the tray, along with spoons." I inwardly smiled as they all added sugar to their tea. One reporter who seemed nicer than the rest remarked, "This is a lovely tea set, and the tea is excellent. Where did you purchase it?" I replied, "It is from the Lomonosov factory in St. Petersburg, Russia." I took a seat on the couch and asked, "Have you compiled your list of questions?" The nicer reporter confirmed, "Yes, we did, and if you do not mind, I would like to start." I nodded at her. All 3 cameras were turned on, and she began, "Hello, viewers. This is Martina Sertis. Today we have the pleasure of interviewing a woman whom many have hailed as the hero of our city. She has been instrumental in the destruction of the teenage bus gang and the serial assaulters ring, both of which plagued our city. Today's interview will be slightly different because Ms. Reynolds has only consented to give 1 interview. As a result, we have combined our questions, and each of us will take turns asking our questions. Ms. Reynolds, you have a lovely accent. Where are you from?" I replied, "Please call me Maria, and I am from Moscow, Russia." The next reporter gave her prologue. "Hello, you all know me. I'm Georgiana Burrows. Ms. Reynolds, do you mind if I call you Maria?" I smiled and replied, "Please all 3 of you call me Maria. The use of Ms. Reynolds makes me feel old." Georgiana and the other reporters laughed, and the Georgiana asked, "Maria, we have heard you are married to a Marine?" I answered, "That is correct. My husband is currently stationed overseas." The third report had to do his prologue. "Hello, everyone. Of course, many of you recognize me as John Rowan. Maria, what prompted you to ride the bus on the night when the teenage gang attacked your bus?" I replied, "I wanted to see a movie, and since I do not have a driver's license, I took the bus." John doesn't wait for Martina and continued, "Some have said that you were extremely brutal in the way you attacked the teenagers, and after your attack today on the police, many more believe this to be a fact. How do you answer these allegations?" I wanted to cancel the interviews when the doorbell rang. Louise looked out the window and said, "Masha, it's the lawyer from earlier today." I nodded. Louise opened the door. The lawyer walked in and rescued me by saying, "This interview is now canceled." She turned to me and ordered, "Masha, don't answer any more questions." The reporters began to complain again, so I demanded, "Leave my house immediately." The lawyer looked at Louise and ordered, "Please bring in the police who are stationed in front of the house so they can escort these reporters off the premises." Louise left the house. Martina looked at my lawyer and said, "I would love to do a favorable interview with Maria. Please let me know if you agree." She handed the lawyer a business card and left just like the other reporters. I looked at the lawyer and praised her. "Thank you very much for saving me, but I don't even know your name." She held out her hand and said, "Don't worry about it. I know what John Rowan was going to do to you, and it needed to be stopped. And my name is Tanya Torres." I shook her hand. Louise came back into the house without the policeman and remarked, "The police saw the reporters leave and are making sure they leave your property." Louise looked at Tanya and asked, "Why did you end the interviews?" Tanya replied, "Because John Rowan is on a mission to make Masha look bad and to destroy her reputation." Tanya turned to me and said, "Masha, don't ever agree to an interview again. Not unless we screen the questions first, and I'm there with you in case they try to pull a fast one on you." I questioned, "I do not understand the term, pull a fast one." Tanya explained, "When they succeed in an act of deception." Louise furthered the explanation, like when they try to pretend they are your friend and all the time they are stabbing you in the back. I smiled and said, "Et tu, Brute? You too, Brutus?" Purportedly as the last words of the Roman dictator Julius Caesar to his friend Marcus Brutus at the moment of his assassination. Tanya replied, "Exactly. Here, let me show you some of the reports John Rowan has done on you." She opened up her briefcase, removed a tablet, and I was angered as I began to watch his reports. I turned to Tanya and asked, "What can we do to stop him from showing reports like this?" Tanya smiled, held up the business card of Martina Certes, and said, "We fight fire with fire. We give Ms. Certes an interview after we check her questions." I asked, "Why would John Rowan say such terrible things about me?" Tanya replied, "There is some thought that he might have had some friends on the assault gang that you defeated." Louise said, "Masha, you should kick his butt." Tanya cautioned, "Masha, that's the last thing you want to do. He would press charges, and you could be deported." It dawned on me that I could already be in trouble, so I asked, "Tanya, could I be deported for anything I have done already?" Tanya smiled and replied, "Not now that you have me on your side." Flashback, Ben, on another mission. Even though I didn't want to, I agreed to take the older boy because it made sense. We were on our way out the door, and I asked, "I can't keep calling you boy. What's your name?" The boy replied, "I am Amir." "What name is yours?" I smiled at him and said, "My name is Ben." Amir continued, "Ben, I know the houses which have the most captured children. If you do not mind, I will lead the way." He moved very well, almost as silently as I did, so I replied, "That would be great since I want to rescue as many children as possible." Amir interrupted and confirmed my fears. "That is wise, Ben. The Taliban will begin to kill the children when they discover they are being freed." I wanted to ask Amir for more information, but we had almost reached the first building. I touched him on the shoulder to stop him and whispered, "Amir, you need to wait here while I clear the building." He whispered, "Ben, there are probably 8 children in this building and 5 Taliban. Can you take care of all 5 Taliban?" I whispered a reply, "No problem, just don't come in until I call you." I slipped up to the door which barely hung on the frame, listened, and heard the obvious sounds of children crying. I pulled off my NV gear, kicked in the door, and 5 shots later all the Taliban were dead. The children were scared and crying, so I called, "Amir, I need you." He ran into the room speaking in their language, and soon they were quiet. He went up to the most obvious oldest boy and gave him some commands. Then he looked at me, smiled, and said, "Ben, they understand, and will go to the hospital." I verified, "Do they know to keep their robes open?" Amir said, "Yes, sir." I didn't bother to correct him. We made sure the children got out of the house and were headed toward the hospital. I heard a noise outside and said, "Quick, blow out all the candles." We blew out all the candles and heard a voice call, "Hassan?" I slipped on my NV gear, worked my way to the destroyed door, and waited. Soon the scumsucker stuck his head inside just enough for my K-bar to find his throat. I waited, and then another voice yelled, "Abdul." Then some words which I couldn't understand. Amir had worked his way beside me and whispered, "Ben." He asked if Abdul was okay. I finally see the scumsucker's head bob up over a little wall. I raised the AK and shot the scumsucker in the head. Then all hell broke loose because the other men began to fire wildly at the house. I could see where they were from their muzzle flashes. They were all adjacent to each other, so I pulled a frag off my tactical vest and blew all of them to hell. Then I whispered to Amir, "We need to get the hell out of here." He slipped out the door with me on his 6 and whispered, "Ben, good job on that house. Now we go to house with most children in it. Also have most Taliban, so very dangerous. You think you handle 10 or 15 Taliban?" I checked my tactical vest. I had a couple devices I knew I needed and whispered, "Hell yes, let's kill the scumsuckers." Amir chuckled and repeated, "Yes, kill Taliban scumsuckers." We made it to a large house where Amir stopped and whispered, "This is Big Boss house, and he has harem of children and many guards. You kill this Taliban scumsucker and will scare most other Taliban." Unlike the other hovel houses, this was a real house that even had real windows with curtains on them. I rose up, pulled off my helmet, put my ear on the window, and heard many scumsuckers talking. Amir was right, as I thought I could distinguish at least 10 distinct voices. I moved to the real door, pulled 2 flashbangs off my tactical vest, slipped the door open, chucked one in close to the door, and threw the other further back in the room. The flashbangs worked like a charm. When I pushed the door open, the guards had dropped their AKs and were holding their ears. They were easy targets as I dodged through the room and drilled them with my AK. I worked my way toward the back of the room when I was surprised when an AK was fired from behind me. I dropped, spun, and saw that Amir had taken an AK and killed a guard who had just walked into the room. Amir ran up and said, "They had a patrol guard outside that I know not, so I save you. Big Boss should be in back of room." Amir wanted to run to the back of the room, but I grabbed him by his robe and said, "Amir, stay behind me." We worked our way to the back of the room, and I couldn't believe it. The flashbang I threw into the back of the room landed on the Taliban scumsucker and had ripped his chest open. Amir shocked me when he opened his robe and pissed on the scumsucker. Then he explained, "He makes sure to take all children first time. He was terrible, man. Now I get even for time he took me." We made it to the back of the room and found a prison with the children in it. They saw me and began to scream until Amir talked to them. Amir looked at me and said, "They say key for door is around Big Boss neck on ribbon." He went back to the Big Boss, took the key from off his neck, came back and opened the door just as 2 guards walked through the front door. I had my AK up faster than they did and took them down. I guess Amir explained to them what was going on since he looked at me and said, "Ben, some of the little girls are hurt so bad they no walk. We will need to carry them back to the hospital." I agreed. "Okay, Amir, but I will still need to cover you." Amir said, "Ben, you not understand. They are 6 girls of 4 or 5 years, and I not able carry all of them." When I finally saw them, I understood. The scumsucker had brutalized them, and they would never be the same. So I said, "Amir, you stay here with them and tell them not to worry. I'm going to turn off the lights." I pulled up the AK, shot out all the lights, put on my NV gear, went to the door, and checked for any more Taliban scumsuckers. I expected to find quite a few Taliban soldiers and was surprised when I didn't see any. Just to make sure, I tossed a flashbang outside and turned away as it detonated. I turned back, but there still weren't any more Taliban. I headed back to Amir and asked, "Amir, why aren't there Taliban troops here to defend the Big Boss?" Amir replied, "Ben, I think that you scare many of them by attacking Big Boss. They know you are a great warrior if you kill Big Scumsucker Boss." I helped one of the young girls on Amir's back, then I boosted one up into each of his arms. Now it was my turn. Amir ordered one of the girls to climb on my back, the others I picked up like sacks of flour, one under each arm, and we hauled out of the building. Amir stopped and said, "Ben, we must burn down the building. You stay here while I go back and burn building." Amir put the girls down and headed back into the building. It seemed like it took forever, but finally I saw some flames behind the curtains, and Amir ran out. Once again, I helped to get the little girls on his back and loaded into each arm. By then the fire was bright enough that we could be seen, so I ordered, "Amir, we need to run to the hospital." We hauled to the hospital. Flashback, Jack, at the hospital. I wasn't sure about Ben taking the civilian on his mission since it seemed risky to me. But if he could talk to the children and explain to them what they needed to do, it was probably worth it. With Ben being gone, I couldn't sleep, so I was standing watch when one of the Marines announced, "Sergeant Reynolds, we have a group of 8 children headed this way with their robes opened." I ordered, "Get the doctors and nurses to help with the children." He took off to get them, and we all, the doctors, nurses, and I, met them at the door. The head doctor swore, "Son of a bitch. Go wake the lieutenant and ask him when the other medical staff will be here." Now this was something I was going to look forward to, so I agreed. "Yes, sir. I will do that immediately." I walked into Lieutenant George's room and in my command voice asked, "Sir, the head doctor has questioned when the other medical staff will be here." He jumped about 3 feet into the air, landed on his bunk, and swore, "Son of bitch. Sergeant Reynolds, don't you ever wake me that way again." I practically had a heart attack. I replied, still in my command voice, "Sir, the head doctor, who is your superior officer, asked when the additional medical staff will arrive. With the additional 8 children Ben sent here, they are having problems providing adequate care." Lieutenant George grumbled, "Tell the doctor I am coming down and I will inform him what Colonel Maggie said." I couldn't resist it, so I asked, "Permission to leave, sir?" Lieutenant George swore, "Sergeant Reynolds, get the hell out of here." I returned to the doctor and reported, "Sir, Lieutenant George said he would be here soon to provide you with the answer." The doctor swore, "What the hell? Sergeant, please take me to see this lieutenant immediately. He followed me to Lieutenant George's room. We walked into the room, and as I figured, Lieutenant George had fallen back to sleep. The doctor, who was a major, yelled, "Lieutenant, what the hell are you doing sleeping?" Once again, Lieutenant George jumped about 3 feet into the air. He came down on the bed and apologized. "Sorry, sir. I didn't mean to fall back to sleep." The major ripped him a new a-hole. "Lieutenant, we are in the midst of a huge medical crisis, and you're sleeping. Wake the hell up and tell me when the additional medical staff arriving." Lieutenant George looked a little green when he replied, "Sir, they will be here in the morning." The major said, "Lieutenant, that's not acceptable. Get on the comm and get them here immediately. Tell them I said it was a medical emergency." Lieutenant George jumped up and dashed to the comm room. A corporal came in and said, "Sergeant, you need to see what's coming now." I followed the corporal to a window and couldn't believe what I saw. The kid and Ben were hauling 3 little children each, and another 6 children followed them. I swore, hell, the doctor is going to hate hearing about this. I found the doctor and reported, "Sir, we have another 12 children coming in." He swore, "Go find that lieutenant and tell him his grass if he doesn't get me some more medical staff." I found Lieutenant George in the comm room, walked in, and could tell things weren't going well for him. I caught his attention and repeated, "The major says you're his grass if you don't get the medical staff here immediately. Ben is bringing in another 12 children." Lieutenant George began to plead with the person on the other end of the comm system, and finally he threw down the mic in disgust and said, "Screw this shit. You can tell the major they are not coming until tomorrow." I figured it was time for me to help out some, so I asked, "Sir, do you mind if I try?" Lieutenant George said, "Knock yourself out, Sergeant, but if an officer can't do this, I don't know what you expect to do." I smiled at Lieutenant George and said, "Watch and learn." I picked up the mic and asked to speak to John, the cook. It took a little while, but finally he came on and asked, "Jack, my good friend, what can I do for you?" I replied, "John, we're having some problems here. Ben has been bringing in a shitload of children that the Taliban have been assaulting. Hell, he's hauling in another 12 as we're speaking. We don't have the medical staff to take care of all these children." John interrupted, "Jack, don't worry about it. Let me talk to some people, and we will get the doctors and nurses to you as soon as possible." I asked, "Do you think it will be tonight?" John replied, "Jack, I will make sure it's tonight." I smiled at Lieutenant George and replied, "Thanks, John. How's the food holding out?" He replied, "Jack, I think we're going to need to make another midnight requisition soon." I said, "Just let me know a couple days ahead of time, and I will come back and give you a hand." I set down the mic. Lieutenant George looked at me and asked, "Who the hell is John?" I smiled at him and said, "Sir, if you want something done in the Marines, the rank isn't as important as the position. John is the cook." Lieutenant George scoffed. "So the cook, who I thought everyone hated because his food was so bad, is going to get us the medical staff when I couldn't?" I explained, "Sir, John's food was bad because HQ sent the food in unrefrigerated trucks, and by the time it arrived it had spoiled. Once we got him good food, he proved that he was a hell of a cook. I've never eaten better. And yes, sir, he will make sure that we get our medical staff tonight, or I figure that no one will eat tomorrow. In fact, I'd bet you a bottle of bourbon on it." Lieutenant George shook his head and said, "Sergeant Reynolds, don't just stand around here. Go give the major the good news." Lieutenant George really didn't understand how things worked in the Marines, even though I tried to educate him. I further insulted his greenness. "Permission to leave, sir?" He yelled, "Sergeant, get the hell out of here." I left, made it to the door as Ben and the boy arrived with the 12 children. I practically puked when I saw the bloody mess of the little girls they carried. I hoped like hell Ben tortured the scumsucker who did this to them. I told the major, "Sir, I was able to secure additional medical staff for you. They will arrive as soon as possible." The major looked at me and said, "You secured the additional medical staff, not the lieutenant?" I smiled and replied, "Yes, sir, that's correct, and sometime I will tell you all about it." Ben volunteered, "Sir, I would be happy to help with the boys. However, I would not feel comfortable taking care of the girls." The major said, "Right now, until more help arrives, we could really use you. Get cleaned up and into some scrubs." Ben left as the doctors and nurses began to take the children into their triage room. Flashback, Jennifer at home. The pizza looked and smelled great. The doorbell rang and Daniela asked, "Senorita Jennifer, how are my looks?" I smiled at Daniela and replied, "You look great. Now take off your apron and go answer the door." Daniela took off the apron and headed to the door. She was so nervous it was funny, but I knew better than to laugh. She walked into the kitchen with Jed, and Jed remarked, "Something smells really good." I lied a little. Daniela made pizza from scratch for dinner tonight. Jed smiled and asked, "I hope one of them has ham and pineapple on it." Daniela informed him, "Yes, Jed, one pizza has jamon and piña, but I had help from Senorita Jennifer making the pizza." Daddy came into the kitchen, greeted Jed, and asked, Would you like a beer? Jed replied, sure thing. Daddy went to the fridge, pulled out a beer, and handed it to Jed. Jed asked, aren't you having one? I was proud when Daddy said, no, I promised Jennifer I would stop drinking because of the problems we've been having with Evelyn. So you can help me out tonight if you finish off all the beer. Daddy and Jed began to discuss Mother's problems, and I went and checked on the pizza. I came back and announced, the pizza will be ready in 10 more minutes. Jed remarked, good, I'm so hungry I could eat a horse. Before Daniela said anything, I explained the phrase to her, then Daniela commanded, both of you need to wash before dinner. Daddy showed Jed the guest bathroom. He went in and washed. When he was finished, Daddy washed his hands. I checked and announced, the pizza is ready. Daniela helped me pull the pizza out of the ovens. We set the pans on the countertop, sliced the pizza, and loaded up the plates with 2 large slices. Daniela took her and Jed's plate while I took mine and Daddy's plates. We set them down and Daniela insisted, we must thank El Señor for this food. We bowed our head and prayed, then we dug in. Daddy remarked, Jennifer, this is one of your better pizzas. I praised my help. That's because Daniela helped so much with it. Jed added his comments. Daniela, this might be the best pizza I have ever tasted. How did you make it? I smiled as Daniela told Jed all about making the crust and sauce. But what made me smile even more were the looks the two of them exchanged. The 2 slices didn't last long, so I offered, I will bring more pizza. I brought the pan in from the kitchen and loaded up the plates again, making sure to give Jed the ham and pineapple slices that were left. I took pepperoni for myself and gave Daddy slices of the ham pizza. Daniela noticed, Jed, you are finished with your beer, let me bring you another. I jumped up and said, don't worry about it, Daniela, I will bring it. I brought Jed another beer, handed it to him. He opened it and said, you know, life doesn't get much better than this. Homemade pizza, beer, and a lovely woman sitting at the table with me. Daniela blushed, and I fought back a giggle. Dinner was done, so I offered, Daniela, I will take care of the dishes, why don't you and Jed take a little walk? She began to argue until Daddy said, I will help you, Jennifer. Now go take a walk, you two. They left as Daddy and I cleaned the plates, loaded the dishwasher, and turned it on. Daddy said, Jennifer, it was great of you planning this for Daniela and Jed. I smiled and agreed. Yes, those two are so cute together. Flashback, Alexei at home. While we were eating, I stated, Father, if I attend the university, I will be one of the youngest students and I am certain it will cause some issues. Father cautiously replied, what issues, Alexei? I said, the older students will be upset when they discover my age and I am concerned they will physically confront me. Father thought for a moment and asked, then what do you propose we do? I smiled at Father and said, you have done an excellent job on my education. The proof is in the tests I completed. So couldn't I continue to work at home on a curriculum you create for me? He thought for a moment and replied, that would solve the issue of me needing to take you to school. But how would I know you would continue to work each day? I said, Father, I am motivated to study on my own. Plus you will administer tests weekly and can gauge my progress. He thought some more and then said, Alexei, perhaps the university has a program that we can incorporate into the curriculum. I will check with them tomorrow. I like this idea much better than attending the university. Flashback, Ira and Mira, continuing. My sister Mira had become too silent. This alerted me to the probability she planned a reprisal to my previous trouncing encounter. I made sure my senses were on higher alert, which served me well. The origin of my disquiet was not the result of my sister Mira, but because I detected the sounds of Kostia's approaching troops. This time I ordered Mira, do not attack Kostia's troops until we are both coordinated and prepared. They discovered the previously slain troops and began to examine his locale. They were distracted by their ruminations, so the time was apropos. I signaled Mira, and we attacked simultaneously. Flashback, Todd, on the mission. Maria finally calmed down and said, Todd, I am hungry. I smiled at her and signed, don't worry, I will warm some of the leftover food in the refrigerator. Maria added, Todd, please make sure you prepare enough food for Gail. I smiled and signed, Maria, I am not sure there is enough food in the whole house for Gail. I could tell Maria was fine when she giggled at my comment. I pulled out all the food we had and began to heat it in the new microwave. Gail slinked into the kitchen and apologized. My sister, I am sorry I kept saying that you smelled bad. It was just a joke. Maria frowned and added, no, it was a terrible joke. Please do not ever do that to me again. They hugged and harmony was returned to the house. The microwave dinged. I pulled out the food and we had a leftover feast. Dear listeners, next part of the story will be released soon. Please share your thoughts in the comments section below and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe.